Saturday night, the sheriff of Spokane County estimated that 50 to 100 buildings had burned. By 6 o'clock Sunday morning, the number was 640. That is not a correction. That is a measurement of how completely this fire outran the ability of the people standing inside it to see what was happening to them. A statewide emergency is active across Washington right now, and the fire that drove it is still at 0% containment. Here is what actually happened, hour by hour, and why every warning the state issued could not stop it. On Friday, July 31st, the National Weather Service issued a fire weather alert for most of eastern Washington that the state had never seen before. It was called a particularly dangerous situation alert, and it sits one step above a standard red flag warning. It is reserved for the specific combinations of dry fuel and violent weather, where the agency believes fire behavior will exceed what crews on the ground can do about it. Washington had never issued one, not once. It issued that one for Saturday, August 1st. The alert area covered Spokane, the Waterville Plateau, the Okanagan Valley, the Western Columbia Basin, the Colville Reservation, the Palouse, and the Snake River Country. Russ Lane, the Wildland Fire Division Manager at Washington's Department of Natural Resources, put it in plain language the day before anything happened. With extremely dry fuels already on the ground, he said, wildfires were already growing rapidly and were already hard to control, and high winds on Saturday would create explosive fire growth that is rarely seen in Washington state. Everything downstream of that forecast moved. Governor Bob Ferguson mobilized 110 members of the Washington National Guard to fire lines across the state on Friday, the first activation of its kind since 2021, on top of 27 Guard helicopter crew members already assigned earlier in July. Avista, the regional power utility, publicly warned that it might cut electricity to parts of the region on purpose, because it was worried about what its own equipment might do in that wind. On Saturday morning, before a single one of the Spokane fires existed, Ferguson declared a statewide wildfire emergency and a statewide burn ban running through September 30th. The Spokane Fire Department, which normally runs 69 firefighters on duty, put roughly 100 on shift. Police and the county sheriff's office increased staffing too. That is what a system looks like when it sees something coming and believes what it is seeing. And it is worth holding on to because of what happened next. Shortly before noon on Saturday, August 1st, a fire ignited in brush and grass on the West Plains west of Spokane, near where Old Trails Road meets West Euclid Road, just north of Airway Heights. The first size estimate was about 50 acres. Roughly 20 minutes later, it was about 100. The conditions it landed in were exactly the ones the forecast had described. Winds were gusting 35 to 45 miles per hour out of the southwest, with sustained winds of 20 to 30. Relative humidity was in the single digits. The fuel was open grass and brush, with nothing standing in the way of forward spread. National Weather Service meteorologist Joey Clevenger had said it the day before, almost as a prediction of this specific fire. If there is a new start, he said, it is going to be hard to get any kind of containment on it initially with the winds going. He also noted that people in town were not exempt from starting one. Mowing a lawn could do it. Driving with a chain dragging on pavement could do it. The fire was named the Old Trails Fire. State firefighting resources were mobilized at about 1:30 in the afternoon. Before 3:30, Level 3 evacuation orders, the ones that mean go now, not soon, were issued inside Spokane city limits. They kept expanding for the rest of the day. And while that was happening, the county got 2 more fires. Shortly before 4 in the afternoon, the Fairview fire ignited in the Peony Prairie area on the opposite side of the county, opening a second enormous evacuation zone from Market Street to Forker Road. Later in the afternoon, the Autumn Lane fire broke out northwest of the Old Trails ignition point. 3 major fires, 1 county, 1 afternoon, 1 windfield. What the Old Trails fire did over the next several hours is the part that should not be possible. It pushed into Riverside State Park and burned through it fast. Fire maps show it running to the Spokane River, narrowly missing the footbridge at the Bowl and Pitcher area, and then jumping the water. A river did not stop it. On the far bank, it burned uphill through the city's north side landfill, skirted Fairmount Memorial Park, through flames at the Dwight Merkel Sports Complex, blew through the area around the Spokane Rifle Club and into the Westgate Park neighborhood, crossed West 9 Mile Road, and pushed into Indian Trail and onward to West Strong Road on 5 Mile Prairie. By around 4:30 in the afternoon, flames and smoke were coming over the trees next to a Catholic church on West Indian Trail Road. Police were driving north on North Indian Trail Road while residents were fleeing south, and some of those residents had to drive past homes that were already burning to get out. The evacuation swallowed institutions, not just houses. Man Grandstaff VA Medical Center evacuated patients and staff. A rehabilitation home on North Assembly Street evacuated its residents, who waited in the grass for buses. Whitworth University evacuated, with security guards going door to door to confirm the campus was empty. By 7:30 in the evening, homes around Indian Trail Elementary School were burning, and the smoke had blotted out most of the sun. At 20 past 8, the National Interagency Fire Center put the old trail's fire at 3,509 acres. That is roughly 8.5 hours after ignition. Avista had about 40,000 customers without power, much of it cut deliberately, including in areas well outside the evacuation zone. The city opened an evacuation center at the Spokane Convention Center after the first center at Spokane Falls Community College lost power. Buses arrived carrying people from nursing homes and assisted living facilities. 410 families ended up sheltering there. The fairgrounds opened space for RVs and for evacuated animals. The statements coming out of Saturday night are worth quoting directly because they are unusually blunt for officials speaking during an active emergency. Assistant Chief Lance Dahl of the Spokane Fire Department said that in a wind-driven event, there is not a fire department in the United States that can handle a wind-driven event of that size. He also had to ask residents to stop running their sprinklers, because the city was already running into problems with its water towers and pumping capability. So many people in town were pulling water at once that it was straining the system. Spokane County Sheriff John Knowles called in every deputy to help with door-to-door evacuations and told people to prepare to be away from home for at least 24 to 36 hours. He also said something that gets lost in the numbers. They were still having way too many people refusing to evacuate. Major General Gent Welsh, Washington's Adjutant General, told a Saturday news conference that these were the worst fire conditions he had seen in a 38-year career. Then he said this: "When the sun sets and the sun rises, we are going to be in shock." 9 hours after the fire was first reported, city officials still could not say whether anyone had been hurt. Mayor Lisa Brown told reporters they were not in a place where they could discuss the magnitude of the property destruction. And Sheriff Knowles, working from what fire chiefs on the ground could see, estimated that somewhere between 50 and 100 structures had burned. Hold that number. Damage assessment began at 6 o'clock Sunday morning. Cody Rohrbach, the fire chief of Spokane County Fire District 3, reported that the Old Trails fire alone had destroyed 640 structures. Many of them were inside Spokane city limits. Entire blocks in the Indian Trail neighborhood and on 5 Mile Prairie had burned down to their foundations. Saturday night's estimate was 50 to 100. Sunday morning's count was 640. That is off by a factor of 6 to 13, and it is not a criticism of the sheriff. It is a measurement of something else. The event was so large and moving so fast that the people standing inside it could not perceive its actual size in real time. They were not underestimating out of carelessness. They physically could not see it. By Sunday morning, the Washington State Emergency Operations Center put the area-wide figure at approximately 700 structures, including homes. And by yesterday, reporting had moved past that. Roughly 5,000 more structures were listed as threatened. 60,000 people were under evacuation orders inside Spokane city limits, and more than 65,000 were under orders in total. Roughly 5,000 homes were evacuated. Mayor Brown, at a Sunday afternoon news conference, called it really the worst natural disaster our region has faced. Some officials have said publicly that this may prove to be the most destructive wildfire event in Washington state history. As of the most recent reporting, no deaths have been confirmed. Officials have been careful to frame that as an assessment status rather than an all clear. Large portions of the burn area have not been searched yet, and they have said openly that the potential for lives to be lost remains. The cause of the Old Trails fire is still under investigation. By Sunday evening, the 3 fires were combined under a single federal incident management team as the Spokane Complex. 7,708 acres, close to 12 square miles, 0% contained. That number confuses people, and it is worth a minute. 0% containment does not mean nobody is fighting the fire. Containment is not a measure of how much fire is out. It measures the fraction of a fire's perimeter that is enclosed by secured control line. Dozer line, hand line, roads, rivers, or burned out edges that crews are confident will actually hold. A fire can have hundreds of people on it, air tankers flying it, and structure defense running all night long, and still report 0% because not one section of its edge has been locked down yet. So when the Spokane Complex reported 7,708 acres at 0%, the meaning was specific and grim. Every single foot of that fire's perimeter was still capable of moving. There is a related number worth watching in this same fire season. The Muldrite fire, burning southwest of Enchelium, saw its containment fall from 63% to 30% between Thursday and Friday, while it gained roughly 17,500 acres. Containment can run backwards, and when it does, it means one thing. The fire is growing faster than crews can build line around it. It is outrunning suppression. The other thing that needs explaining is the river. The old trails. Fire crossed the Spokane River, and it crossed West 9 Mile Road, and neither of those is a small thing to get past. The fire did not burn across the water. It was thrown across it. Sustained winds in the 20 to 30 mile per hour range with gusts to 45 do two separate things at the same time. First, they tilt the flame front forward, so radiant heat from the fire preheats and dries out the fuel sitting ahead of it, which makes that fuel ignite faster when the flames arrive. Second, and this is the one that matters here, they lift burning material into the air. Embers loft, ride the wind downwind, and land in receptive fuel hundreds of meters or more ahead of the main front, where they start entirely new fires that then burn back toward and merge with the parent fire. That process is called spotting, and it is why a wind-driven fire does not advance the way people picture it. It does not creep forward as a line you can get in front of. It advances as a shower. Water features, roads, and fire breaks stop a fire that spreads by contact. They do very little against a fire that spreads by airmail. Add one more ingredient, and you get Saturday. Single-digit relative humidity removes the overnight recovery period that normally slows a fire down. In an ordinary fire, humidity climbs after sunset. The fuels pull moisture back out of the air, and the rate of spread drops until morning. At single-digit humidity, there is no recovery at all. The fire runs through the night at close to daytime speed. That is precisely why Major General Welsh told people they would be in shock when the sun came up. Assistant Chief Dahl's line about no fire department in the country being able to handle this is not an excuse, and it is not about staffing levels. It is a statement about physics. Direct attack on the head of a fire, putting crews and equipment right at the leading edge and cutting it off, only works if those crews can move faster than the fire does. Once the forward rate of spread passes what an engine crew or a bulldozer line can achieve, direct attack stops being an option. Suppression shifts to defending individual structures, working the flanks, and waiting for the wind to drop. Spokane fought this fire with roughly 100 firefighters against a fire being pushed by a 45-mile-per-hour wind. The department did not fail. It was operating outside the range, where suppression is a meaningful concept at all, and it gets worse because of where the state already was on Saturday morning. Washington did not enter this weekend fresh. As of Friday, 10 large wildland fires were already burning across the state, having consumed a combined 200,000 acres with roughly 4,000 personnel already assigned. Mutual aid was arriving from more than a dozen states, including Alaska and Florida, and crews had been reported coming in from Australia. The season-scale numbers are worse. Washington has seen more than 1,000 fires since the start of the year and roughly 425,000 acres burned, over 660 square miles. That is more acreage than any full year since 2021, and the season's usual August peak had not even arrived yet. The state legislature appropriated $120 million for firefighting in 2026, double the previous year's budget, and this happened anyway. Underneath all of it is the condition of the ground itself. Washington declared a statewide drought emergency in early April, the fourth consecutive year it has done so. April snowpack, at its normal annual peak, came in at 52% of normal in Washington and 14% of normal in Oregon. Since that April declaration, temperatures have run above normal and precipitation below normal statewide. Fuel moisture across eastern Washington has been tracking below normal and in places hitting record lows. That chain matters more than it sounds. Fuel moisture is simply how much water is held in living and dead vegetation, and below roughly 6 to 8% in fine dead fuels, grass, needles, twigs, fire spreads with almost no energy input required. Reduced snowpack means earlier meltout, which means soil and fuel moisture peak earlier in the year and then decline for longer, which means the window where fuels are cured and ready to burn opens weeks ahead of schedule and stays open straight into the season's peak wind and lightning period. A 52% snowpack does not just mean less water in August. It means the fire receptive period was stretched at the front end by weeks. That is why officials keep saying this fire was normal and the conditions were not. A grass fire in high wind is an ordinary event in eastern Washington. The same ignition in a normal year as a 200-acre incident that makes the local news and is forgotten by Tuesday. There is a failure mode inside this event that does not show up in any single fire statistics, and it deserves to be said clearly. Wildfire suppression is a queuing problem. Every jurisdiction plans for a certain number of simultaneous incidents, and mutual aid is supposed to backfill everything past that. But when 10 large fires are already burning statewide with 4,000 personnel committed, the next available engine for the 11th fire is not down the road. It is being barged from Alaska or flown in from Florida or dispatched from Australia. The Stevens County Fire District that responded to an ember-caused fire in the Suncrest area said it outright. Houses burned because fire resources ran short. 3 homes went along Meadowview and more went as the fire ran uphill. That is the mechanism. It never appears in a containment percentage or an acreage figure. It appears in the gap between what a fire could have been held to and what it actually became. The same weekend, Spokane Public Schools lost its ability to see its own buildings because the district's cameras outran their backup power supply. Crews had to ask the public to stop flying drones over the fire because a single drone sighting grounds every aircraft working the incident and sets suppression back hours, and in a wind-driven run, aircraft are the only tool still capable of moving faster than the fire. The reason to stop treating this as a Spokane story is what was happening on either side of it at the same time. Oregon is on pace to break its modern wildfire record with nearly 1.8 million acres already burned as of late July, off a snowpack of 14% of normal. North of the border, British Columbia evacuated more than 5,000 people in a single 24-hour window and reported 31 new wildfires in that same period, with storm damage knocking out power to more than 23,000 customers in the Okanagan and Kootenay regions. The Bradley Creek fire, discovered on July 31st, more than doubled over the weekend to roughly 26 square kilometers, driven by gusts reported at 115 kilometers per hour along the west shore of Okanagan Lake, where it destroyed lakefront homes. Evacuation orders went out for the main reserve of the Okanagan Indian Band, the township of Spalumcheen, and the Splatson First Nation. Further north, the Pear Lake fire near the village of Clinton is now the largest active wildfire in the province at roughly 1,000 square kilometers. 3 jurisdictions, 2 countries, 1 continuous bed of fuel under 1 drought regime, hit by 1 weather pattern, failing at the same time. Spokane is not an isolated local disaster. It is the place where a regional condition happened to produce the highest structure count. And Spokane County specifically has now been here 3 times in 3 years. In August of 2023, the Gray Fire and the Oregon Road Fire started on the same day north and west of the city and destroyed 710 structures between them, including 366 homes, and killed 2 people. The state's chief deputy fire marshal said, at the time it was fair to call those 2 fires collectively the most destructive the state had experienced. In mid-June of this year, the Upriver Fire burned just outside city limits, destroying or heavily damaging at least 15 homes, and producing Washington's first wildfire fatality of 2026. That was 6 weeks ago. And now the Spokane Complex has matched the 2023 structure count in a single afternoon and evening. Here is where things actually stand. Cooler temperatures and lighter winds arrived Sunday, shifting out of the north, and forward progress was largely stopped on the Fairview and Old Trails perimeters. That is the only favorable development in this entire event, and it is a weather gift, not a suppression victory. The complex was still at 0% containment when that wind shift arrived. 3 things are worth watching over the next several days. First, the structure count, which is preliminary and which officials have said repeatedly will rise as damage assessment teams reach neighborhoods that were too dangerous to enter. Second, the casualty question, which is genuinely open. No deaths have been confirmed, but large portions of the burn area have not been searched, and officials have not offered an all clear. Third, the cause of the Old Trails fire, which remains formally undetermined. It is worth being precise there. Under investigation means undetermined, not concealed. And human-caused ignitions nationally are overwhelmingly things like equipment use, vehicles and debris burning rather than anything deliberate. But the question underneath all of this is bigger than the final numbers. And it is the one Washington now has to answer. If what failed here was capability, not enough engines, not enough crews, not enough aircraft against too many simultaneous fires, then it is a budgeting problem, and the state has already doubled its firefighting appropriation to $120 million, and watched this happen anyway. If what failed was exposure, a 4th consecutive drought year, record low fuel moisture, half the normal snowpack, and neighborhoods built right up to the edge of cured grassland, then no number of engines fixes it. That second possibility is the one the forecasts point toward. A strengthening El Niño, projected by some toward the super category, correlates in the Pacific Northwest with warmer, drier winters and reduced mountain snowpack. If that verifies, the 2027 season starts from a fuel state at least as poor as this one. The conditions that produce the Spokane Complex are not scheduled to reset over the coming winter. Every part of the warning chain worked. The National Weather Service reached for a designation it had never used in the state's history, a full day out. The governor declared an emergency for a fire that did not exist yet. The guard was already moving, the fire department was already staffed up, and the utility was already threatening to cut the lights. Then a fire started in grass at noon, and by dawn, 640 buildings were foundations, and 65,000 people were somewhere other than home. Knowing exactly what is coming turns out not to be the same thing as being able to stop it. That is the finding here, and it is the one worth carrying into the rest of this fire season.